Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Early Years Learning Lab. Coach Shane here as always, and we're presented by Mini Monstars. Super excited to have our 5th guest on today, Amy Sparks. How you going?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks, Shane. Thanks for having me.
No worries, no worries. As we kind of said earlier, just if you can kind of mention or kind of just go through your career and kind of introduce yourself, what you've done in the early years sector, just so the viewers and audience can kind of get to know you a bit better. Then we can kind of get into it and the stuff we want to cover.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Shane.
No worries.
Hello, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Amy Sparks. I'm an early childhood teacher. I've been teaching in the early years now for over 10 years, between 10 and 13 years. I started off my teaching career in New Zealand, studied at Canterbury University, graduating there with my degree, my bachelor degree in early years education. And I started teaching nursery age children 0 to 2, and then moved into preschool age children as well. So I was teaching in New Zealand for about 3.5, 4 years. I had always wanted to move overseas and decided that I would make a move to Australia as an initial first little step in teaching. So I moved up to Brisbane, where I started working as an early childhood teacher, kindergarten teacher, in the private sector there for a couple of kindergartens, and I really enjoyed that. While in Australia, I was teaching the Queensland Kindergarten Guidelines and the Early Years Learning Framework. After being in Australia for a couple of years and teaching kindergarten, I had an opportunity to move to Singapore to work at the Australian International School. So I went over and I had an interview in Singapore. And I was lucky enough to be offered a teaching position there in the early years. So I've been teaching in Singapore for 5.5 years. So sort of come on today to have a talk about, all things early years, kindergarten teaching, international school teaching, curriculum, what it's like to change countries and move and teach in a different country, and just to give some support and guidance to other teachers who might be considering, wanting to make that change as well.
For sure. Yeah, it's awesome. So I guess the first thing I wanted to touch on, which what was the initial thought? Like what made you kind of feel to come to Australia, to Brisbane, and make that transition from New Zealand? Was it something you've always wanted to do, or how did that kind of come about? And did someone speak to you about it, or you just always had that kind of in you?
I'd always wanted to travel and work overseas.
Yeah.
And I guess I just didn't really know how to go about doing it. But I had the thought and I had the idea. And when my son went to university, he went off to Canterbury University. That's when I decided that, that I was capable of going and doing that. And moving to Brisbane was an easy step in a way, because I had a couple of friends living here already, and I knew that my teaching qualifications, after being assessed by ASEQA, which is the Australian government authority, they assess all of the teaching qualifications that come into the country. You have, to be able to teach in Australia, you have to have your qualifications assessed, and I knew that that was something that could be achieved. And my teacher registration as well is assessed in Australia. So after going through those processes, then it was relatively easy for me to, as an easy step from New Zealand to Australia, as a springboard wider.
For sure, for sure. And then what was the kind of, I guess, what did you notice coming from New Zealand, then going to Australia? What was the kind of little differences, or were they big differences in kind of the way things got taught, or?
There's some small differences and some big differences as well. So
Right.
some of the bigger differences in how Australia and New Zealand set the early years systems is around the qualification of teachers. So
Yep.
in New Zealand, 80% of qualified teachers in a setting, 80% of teachers in a setting have to be qualified. So they have to have like a diploma in level 7 diploma or degree in early childhood education, versus Australia, where the kindergarten teacher is the only teacher that's required to have that level 7 bachelor qualification. And then they have the Cert 3 and the diploma qualified staffing now, which support the younger age groups. So I
Yeah.
think that was a big difference coming in and going for job interviews and having the centre director or the principal saying, "Oh, well, you'll be the kindergarten teacher because you've got the bachelor qualified teacher." So I'll be like, "Okay."
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah,
I was
kind
like,
of.
"Oh, Okay, so okay, so that sort of took for me to sort of get my mind around the difference being, because for me, teaching any age group what requires that qualification. So that was probably one big difference. So I guess for teachers coming into Australia, that would be something they need to note that
Yeah, for
with their
sure.
qualification, the centre directors would want them or push them more into like a kindergarten role.
Yeah.
So that was fine. So I took on the kindergarten role. That was probably one of the differences. The other differences in comparison to New Zealand and Australia is that um, the probably the classrooms are broken down into age groups a little bit more. So usually, often we have smaller settings, and
Yeah.
there's
Okay.
only two classrooms that children go into. But here, I think in Australia, there's definitely that year age group, and once you've done your year in one classroom or one room, then you move to the next room, to the next room, to the next room. So you
Yeah.
probably have a lot more different teachers. Whereas in a lot of the centres that I had been teaching in New Zealand, or the way that New Zealand does it, sometimes the children will be in the same room for 2 or 3 years and have the same teachers. So I think, there's that managing of the transitions as well. But we do have those bigger centres in New Zealand now also. So
Yeah. So, and how did you find that? Because obviously that would kind of be a big difference where you maybe have, I guess, 3, 4, 5 year olds in the same classroom. Did you notice any way that kind of worked better, or not even that, but was there, because obviously the young.
yeah, Shane, I actually do like the system in Australia a lot more at first, because when things are different and there's change, often, it's as a teacher, we always open minded and open to things like this and like
Yeah.
differences. And when you're moving overseas, you have to be aware of that. Those things are going to be that way. And so I was open minded to it. But actually, it works really well because you can cater to the age group or the zonal proximal development for each child a lot easier, because they're in that. Like say if you're setting up a painting experiment or activity, and then like a 2-year-old comes over, they just pull it over onto the floor. That's their way of exploring it. But then you might have a 4 or a 5-year-old who's actually inquiring into that, or who they're wanting to
Well, it's actually, yeah.
interact and use more diverse resources. So I think I actually do like that, and I probably
Yeah.
I do like that age group now as well. So I mean, it just takes a different amount of planning.
Yeah. For sure, especially when I was just thinking, especially for the young, like I guess your nursery age, once the transition from kind of crawling and walking, if you've got kids running around and then other kids kind of not being able to move, it could I'd imagine it'd be quite tough to kind of make sure everyone's safe and it's a safe environment for everyone. So yeah, I can imagine like having those age groups would have been a kind of a eye opening for you, like, oh, this actually works quite well.
Yes. Yeah, it did work quite well. And it's quite nice that you start with the children that you have for the whole year, and then you see them through the year and then they move up. So that's quite nice. But me being in the kindergarten, they were moving off to school. So then, that was a different,
Yeah, for sure. We used to have sometimes when we go out, because Mini Monstars, we run sports, music, yoga, and gymnastics incursions. So sometimes when we're outside and everyone's kind of outside, it's the toddlers are outside, the kids are outside. Like the kindergarten, the older age group might be participating, and then the toddler group might just come in and start throwing stuff. And so I can imagine if you had that all the time, it could get a bit crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
No, great. And then I guess that was the transition from obviously New Zealand to Australia. Now, I'd imagine the next transition when you went from Australia to Singapore was, what kind of did you find there? And that would have been maybe a little bit of more of a harder transition, or did you find it not too bad as well?
I think the transition was quite definitely coming to Australia and working in Australia did support me for my transition to Singapore, because I was working in the Australian International School.
Okay.
So yeah, so even though I'm living in Singapore, we have a lot of international schools there, and those international schools take on curriculums from different countries. So although we also had the International Baccalaureate curriculum, we use the Early Years Learning Framework curriculum, which is the Australian early childhood curriculum. So I was using the same early childhood curriculum, and because it was Australian International School, we use the same school terms, similar school terms and similar processes. So, it was really
Wasn't too
the
bad.
insight. Yeah, a lot of it was similar, like the structures of the classrooms going with yearly age groups. There was a lot of things that were very similar because we did want to provide a home away from home for our Australia and New Zealand families, but also offer to our international families the love, care, respect that we take from Australia. And, those people, the families coming to the Australian International School in Singapore were seeking out the Australian culture, the Australian New Zealand culture of that openness, caringness, love, care, respect for children. So it was, very similar. We had a lot of Aboriginal artwork. We celebrated all the Australian and New Zealand holidays.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. And I guess, what was the process? Obviously, did you seek out, like, obviously you've gone from New Zealand to Australia, and did you seek out, I want to head to Singapore, or was that kind of brought to you? Like, how would someone who's listening, and what are the processes that, they're thinking, okay, I want to maybe do some work overseas, but they just don't have any idea how they'd go about it, where to start, where to look. What are the few of the processes that you have to go through?
I was really lucky in my situation because I had a good friend of mine working in Singapore, and she had mentioned to me that there were some jobs available. And although I'd only been in Australia for 2 years, I was still happy in Australia and was not considering moving right away. But on my way for a holiday, I had a stopover in Singapore, and I went into the school, and she had arranged for me to meet with the principal of the school. And as I walked in, we had like a semi-interview and like talked about different things, and then they asked me to re-interview, and so I was able to interview for a position that was coming up and made available. So that's sort of how I was able to get in, and then it sort of went from there, which was amazing. So definitely it can be word of mouth. In the international school sector, definitely comes down to a lot of it of like where you've worked previously or who you know and who people know. It can come down to that. Like just recently, last week I was in Tokyo, and a colleague of mine, we called a school, international school in Tokyo, Seisen International School, and they offered to show us around the school because the principal there had worked in Singapore, and they were also looking for Australian, New Zealand teachers. So they were more than happy, to show us around. So I think once you know, or people that are there, then it's very easy to get these contacts. Like people are really open, international schools are open to showing you around the school, if they're looking for what you have got to offer them. But other ways that you can do that is, you can call directly, you can contact the school themselves. All international schools have websites. There's got employment opportunities on their websites directly. You can go through them in that way, send in through your CV, through LinkedIn as well. If you put open to work on your LinkedIn profile, and if you like open, you can touch base with lots of different people through LinkedIn. And then also there's search. And I think there's 4 or 5 different international school webs, like people that help you find jobs as well. So
cool.
There's a lot of help out there.
Yeah. So just kind of, I guess, reaching out to people, going online, doing a little bit of research through LinkedIn, online, that sort of stuff would probably be the best way to kind of start the process.
Yes, definitely.
And then I guess once you kind of start and you've got accepted, can you touch on what's the transition like? Finding a place overseas, or like all the stuff that you'd have to do to start working. Is that a long process?
I've reached out and had the interview and been offered a job, then usually the school will have a HR department, and the HR department will reach out to you, and they'll provide you with your contract, and then they provide you with like support around finding housing. They can connect you with like a real estate who will then like act on behalf of you to search for houses for you, or you can come over and search houses yourself. So that those sorts of things. Shipping as well. So dependent on your contract, like most contracts will be expatriate contracts. So then you'd be looking to have inside of the contract, you'd be wanting to have additional housing costs covered, and then your shipping, shipping you into the country and shipping you out of the country as well, because that's really expensive, and that it's
Right.
probably best to try to negotiate in cubic meters rather than a cost. Because, for example, I was in Singapore for 5 years, and the cost of shipping now has, like,
Yeah.
increased hugely. So, but because my shipping was in cubic meters, that doesn't change. Yeah,
Okay.
those. Yeah, and then you want to be looking at your medical insurance as well. You definitely need to be covered for like medical insurance, and look quite in depth about what that medical insurance looks like. So I think once all of those documents come in,
Yeah.
look over it yourself, or even seek some professional help to look over those and see, especially if you're a family going over, because it's going to be a lot more expensive for you to relocate into another country. You want to be asking questions like, if you have children, does the school provide, how many spaces do they provide for you on your contract? Because some contracts will offer you 2 positions of free education, but do you need to pay tax? Because sometimes in countries you need to pay tax on that education, and sometimes it might be $50,000 a year for school fees per child. So that's quite a lot of tax that you might be looking to pay on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So just making sure people doing their research and just really kind of digging deep into everything would be like definitely like on top of the priority list. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And then whilst you were overseas, I guess, what were some of the takeaways? Obviously it's a similar program. You're obviously using the EYLF, that sort of thing. But what were some learnings that you took away from working overseas that you might have not had when in New Zealand and Australia?
I think definitely working in a multicultural environment. Like, when I was working in Singapore, we had over 60 nationalities of staff just teaching in the school.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, and also different families, because I think at the time when I went, our population was about 60% New Zealand, Australian, and then 40% from other nationalities, and that's changed now, definitely. The makeup of cultural diversity is huge, and with that comes a lot of different ways of being and doing, a lot of different languages. Like, most of the children are like trilingual. They're speaking their mother tongue, their father's tongue. They speak English, and then in Singapore, for example, we teach Mandarin, so they learn Mandarin as well. So
Oh,
they speak,
great.
learning four languages, and we're talking about 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
So that is something that's different, really different. And I know that we have like multiculturalism in New Zealand and Australia as well, but I think for the diversification of it is huge.
Yeah.
More in international schools, and the children are speaking those different languages. And other things to take into considerations, a lot of children are like third cultured children as well, so that mother, father are born in different countries. Child's born in, say, for example, Singapore, but the family are not from Singapore.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and you don't become a Singapore citizen just because you're born in the country. So, they're born. So your nationality. So when we're teaching about identity, or we're teaching children who they are, if we're looking at that, self-identity, then, it becomes quite complex.
Mm, for sure. And
So
how do you navigate that?
Well, we often talk to the child about what nationality is on your passport. Legally, that's the country where you belong, like you can go to. So we look at the passport, like what does it say on your passport? But then we also talk about where were you born, and then we talk about where were your parents born. So we can go
Yeah.
back to those, and where are your family? Where do your different members of your family live as well? So we take into account all of those things when we talk to children about those, and just be aware of that as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think just being aware too that, families move, a lot of families in international school settings, they have moved to this country. They don't have their family, and especially in the early years. I mean, anyone who's got young children knows how complex it is juggling work, school, all of these things, let alone living in another country. And I think, working in the early years, is we know a lot of our work is around obviously educating and caring for children, but it's also supporting families. And we always look to that community and involving our families, and, taking them in that embrace of our early years. It's a special type of education. We welcome our families in, and we don't know the child unless we know the family. And so I think, it's a really important to make those relationships with families, because they often reach out to us because they don't have their family around them at this moment in their life. And
Yeah.
so, we can be that connection, that support for them.
Yeah.
So,
There you go. Keep going.
yeah, more so ever, I guess, that's really important in our home countries too, but when we're away from our home countries. And I think you probably don't really understand what that feels like unless you are away from your home country and you realize, how important family is, or how important those connections are.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess that could be a good takeaway for centers, in Australia and that sort of stuff, that building that community obviously might not be to that extent because it's a little bit different circumstance, but having a community within your center is super important.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And then I think, we have a lot of people moving to Australia, moving to New Zealand as well. And, definitely in Australia, we're multicultural here, and, how important it is. And that's probably one of my biggest takeaways is how important, or understanding how that family feels now, what they've gone through to move to another country, what it feels like to be a minority and not speak the language and not be able to buy the food that you want. Like, you can't just go down to the supermarket and find the food that you're used to eating.
Yeah, for sure.
Or, just simple things like that, which you think, oh, it's not much, but over time it is actually. If you want to make a special recipe, but you don't know where to go to get those ingredients, or you don't have a car, you can't just get in the car and drive to the place that has those ingredients, because then how do you get it all home? And, it's just things like that we might not think of. Why families especially are setting themselves in a country. It's difficult.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it'd just be kind of, as a educator or as a center, just kind of being a bit more, mindful about that, and kind of, a bit more respectful for those sort of families.
Yeah. Understanding, like, if families don't turn up with everything all together, that's why.
Yeah,
That's why they're just hanging in there, like, the fact that they turned up is, a miracle, I think. And that's the case for most families, I'm sure, most days. I know in my years of experiencing people, a lot of my families are like, gosh, Amy, you wouldn't have known what's happened this morning. And I'm like, oh, I've got a pretty good.
Yeah, I know what's got a bit of an idea.
Yeah.
That's great. And then I guess when you were kind of like in teaching and that sort of stuff, what was some of the, I guess, takeaways you learned from maybe other educators? Were you kind of looking and getting feedback from other educators and seeing how they were, like, when you were obviously first over there, were you kind of seeking, just like speaking with each other? Was it kind of quite like a friendly vibe and communicated? And
it's always like a really collaborative approach. And I think the expat community is really strong. And you've probably heard, like, in Dubai, there's a big expat community. Singapore, there's a big expat, we have, these communities, and it's really supportive. And, it's really supportive within the school network and the network as well, because they've all done that too. So that's one thing that you always have in common with people who are living overseas. It takes a certain kind of person actually to be able to get up and go and do that for a start. And then, everybody's welcoming and kind, because that's what you needed when you moved. You needed to be, like, welcomed and cared for, and, treated and supported and guided. And, from my experience, definitely I had, overwhelming support and kindness and understanding, as, not only from my colleagues, but also from the leadership in the team, and the school environment in itself, including families, because they've also done it too. So, I think there's definitely that, overwhelming support, and for people moving over and giving time. And, Singapore, especially, the qualifications that you need to work and teach there, like education in Asia, is, held in really high regard. And so, you are working with really knowledgeable, experienced teachers, which is really nice as well. So you can learn and grow from each other too.
Yeah, for sure. I guess that's kind of because obviously especially if it's someone's first time, I guess, moving away from home or moving away from their home country, like, they're going to be nervous, they're going to be anxious, like, there's going to be a lot of different emotions that they feel. So it's good to know that when you're over there, so if they're listening, that they will be supported, they will, and for them to reach out like communicate, say hi, kind of get themselves. Because obviously, when you first move over somewhere, you're gonna feel a bit lonely and isolated. But as soon as you can get into something that's a bit of a community, like at least if you've got the school, you've got the teachers and that sort of stuff. At least brings a start to what you can start building a life in another country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, totally. And yeah, totally. And there's lots of things that you can do to support yourself in other countries as well. It's exciting. You
Yeah.
know, I would like definitely say to people, it's really exciting. Is it easy? No. Is it achievable? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And then I know you've been doing some kind of getting off that for a little bit, and you were doing some like teaching children cooking and that sort of stuff. Did you want to maybe touch on that a little bit, like what you've been doing with that, and like why you kind of do it, what you enjoy about it?
Yeah, well, before being a teacher, I worked as a professional chef in New Zealand. So I've always been really passionate about bringing that through to children, and children love cooking. If there's anything they love to do is cooking.
Yeah.
So, it's really nice to see them in, some of the big, some of the developmental growth areas and support that we really want to be pushing with children is agency and self-help skills, and teaching them instinctively like how to feel excited about doing those things for themselves. So I think learning to cook is a really good self-help skill, teaches them about nutrition. It covers a lot of things, but also they love to make food, and lots of learning can come through that as well. So definitely early in my career I've always wanted to, I've always taught children how to cook in New Zealand, Australia, and Singapore as well. So yeah, I really enjoy doing that, and often asking parents to send in some of their favorite recipes, getting them involved as well. They'll do that, and then the children can, share those with their friends, and we make cookbooks. And I often make very simple recipes that the children can help follow. So I use little pictures of the ingredients and put down there. So then I'm like covering off maths and literacy as well. The children count how many, what's this? Eggs. Who knows where the eggs look like? What do eggs look like? Where do eggs come from? Who knows how to break an egg? Like even starting with something simple as making scrambled eggs, although a lot of people don't let you use eggs now because there's allergies, but we were allowed to eggs, or even simple thing like melting butter, and like change cause and effect. What happens? It was solid, but now if we heat it, what's happened? It's melted, it's runny. Wow, what it changed. How did that happen? And just start to get them to think about that sort of language as well. And then of course they love to eat it.
Taste it, yeah.
It's funny because we make sometimes I'll make fruit smoothies with the children as well. And they would not eat them at home, but when they make food, they eat it. So it's quite interesting to see that that change in them as well. So when they're actually involved in making their food, then they're more likely to actually eat it as well and try new things, be risk takers.
It's funny that you would say that, because I think I was speaking to Shanae about that, about the like empowering them when you're kind of involved. You could be an adult, or if you're a kid, being a part of the process will kind of have more. You'll be involved more, which means you're more likely to try the food, or do more. If you're part of the process of it, you're going to kind of, you know what I mean. So that's interesting. You say that.
Yeah, well, they feel like children have got some control over it. They saw the food, they're more willing to have a risk take on it, and they enjoy it and they love it. They love mixing all the ingredients together, and like trying a little bit of it and then cooking it and seeing the difference. So I think really, I love to do that with children too. So that's been quite a big part of one of my teaching practices in all countries, which everyone loves food no matter where you are. Food actually brings people together too. Like you talk about what are the differences when you live in different countries and teach in different countries, and food is one of the big differences is that the food is different. But people love food no matter where you go. Like all of my travels around the world, what the number one thing is food. People love food, so I think it brings people together as well, which is really nice.
For sure. And I was actually also thinking, like, because obviously our sort of stuff we do is all about gross motor skills, that sort of stuff. The fine motor skills and all the stuff they'd be getting from, learning how to like do cuts, or like playing with the food, or, like cutting tomatoes up into small little, or whatever it is. It'd be really good for definitely their fine motor skills, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I think what you just touched on, Shane, for our early childhood children, is that the gross motor skills is actually the most important, because we can't have the fine motor skills without the gross motor skills.
Yeah.
So firstly, the children, they need to have well-developed control of their body. So if they don't have, the coordination and the balance, of the large motor skills and that ability to know they even have a body to start off with, and then that they can control their body. Because I'm sure you've gone to teach a child to cook a ball when they've no idea how to actually lift their foot up to kick the ball.
Yeah.
So it's like, first of all, we need to make the children aware that they have a body and they can take control of their body. And then once they know that, and then they need to coordinate their body, it's like, we can't do any of the the finer things only come once they have control of that, because a lot comes from the arm and the shoulder. They can't control the hands and the finger and the opening and closing, and they can't do that without that gross motor skills. So that is hugely important in the early years.
For sure. And I think what you touched on about them, when they're always learning when they're doing like new things like cooking, or like, as you said, melting the butter, and like seeing something go from salt, that's all kind of learnings for them. So anything when the kids are doing stuff and they're involved and they're taking interest, a lot of it's new to them. So when you said that, I was thinking about us, like when we get children to kick a ball, if it's the first time they've done it, they won't actually drop. Like, let's play like AFL football, for instance. They won't actually drop the ball onto their foot. They'll actually throw the ball, because they don't know that if they use their foot, the ball will actually go as well. So a lot of time, instead they'll swing their leg, but they won't actually drop the ball onto their foot. It's not until you kind of teach them just to stick their leg out and just drop your ball and let it hit your foot and see what it does. And when they drop it and they see the ball kind of hit their foot and go a little bit left or go a little bit right, that's when they start, oh, okay, so I can use, you know what I mean? So it's all that learning, and something like cooking, like the amount of learning they would get from doing different things. And there's so many ways you can take it. As you said, using an egg, like a lot of different textures, feeling, all that. It would be great. I imagine it'd be so good for them.
Yeah, they love it. And they love to make one of the favorite things that children love to cook is a gingerbread man cookie. Because the story, the gingerbread man.
Oh, no, I don't.
Oh, you don't know? There's a classic early childhood story that everyone in the world knows.
Which one? I know.
It's about a little old man and a little old lady, and they make a gingerbread man, and he jumps out of the oven and he runs, and the animals chase him, and he goes over the river, and the fox eats him. Anyway, that's the story.
Oh,
and
okay.
the children love that, and so they always love to make a gingerbread man. Many hundreds of times I've made the gingerbread man with the children. So that links to their knowledge or their prior knowledge, and of course they love to make cupcakes and
yeah, for sure. The when I hear ginger, I just think of Shrek and run as fast as you can, and he's got these little legs. Is that the story? Oh, that's the story. Okay, I do know that one, only from Shrek though. So shout out to Shrek for putting that knowledge into
classic childhood stories.
Yeah, that's right. What are other takeaways? And what, like, we've covered a fair bit, but what other, like, was there anything else you wanted to touch on that could help educators? Let it be like some overseas stuff or stuff you've learned and wanted to pass on knowledge in the classroom that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I really would want to encourage people to go and teach overseas. Like, give it a go, take your family. It's an incredible opportunity. The people that you meet teaching overseas, they're lifelong friends and family. And, it gives you opportunity to meet people all over the world. Like, I now know people from all over the world, children and families. And I think it's a really rich opportunity, and it's really achievable. Financially, it's a good opportunity as well. And there's a lot of professional growth too. So I definitely would, encourage people to do it, because it's achievable. There is a bit of back work and paperwork, but once that's done, you can get it done. I guess things just to be aware of is that you need to have police clearances, and they can take a little bit of time to get. And so for each country that you've worked in, you need to have full police clearances for that time that you've been in those countries, and just to keep those. And you need to get documents verified. Like, there's a few different things, so just making sure that you've got all your documents. What I do is I get them my documents certified and keep them on my Google Docs in folders. And so I have them there, and that's made it really easy for me to move from country to country and back home to New Zealand now. And then if I wanted to come back to Australia, then I could do that also. So it's just having those documents on your Google Drive or on your Dropbox, whatever platform that you want to use, and have them certified. And then, they're basically as good as a original document, and then you can you've got access to those. So you keep all your police clearances, keep all your documentation. And I think you need to be getting letters of employment from your employers as well, to show how many years you've been teaching at each school or each kindergarten or each setting. So then that builds up your that just builds up your credibility and shows which steps that you should be paid on as well, and keeping those on your Google Drive. So I guess just be really tidy with your documents, making sure they're online. I mean, everything's online now, so the world's changed. That we've got to move forward with it, especially if you're looking to move and teach in Asia as well. Things very forward moving, definitely. And just be prepared for that as well. Different countries manage things in different ways, but you can teach in Asia. There's a lot of opportunities in Southeast Asia. You can teach. There's Australian schools in Vietnam. There's a lot of work in China as well, Europe.
Yeah, so the list goes on.
Yeah, anywhere.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's great. Thanks so much for coming on. So before we kind of head off, there's always a few things at the end of a podcast, I always ask this question. So the question is, who do you think would be good for the podcast? Whoever you say, you have to try get them on. and then also, because that sometimes can get a bit hard. So the other one is, what other topics and discussions do you think we should have on the podcast that you think, the early year sector needs, or like would kind of bring value to the early year sector?
I think definitely we should be having some conversations about ratios around in the early years, definitely globally. I think that needs to be a big conversation that I definitely would want to push. I think we need to be really looking at that, and I think we need to be looking at the qualifications of staff and educators in the early years, and that we have qualified teachers in primary and secondary. Excuse me. We should be having qualified teachers in early years as well, because all research says that the brain development rapidly happens in the early years. And I'm not taking away from the work that people do in the early years, because it's incredible. But I just I think that we should be upholding the professional, upholding early years in the same regard that we do. And I guess working overseas, that's one of the things that is because everyone needs to be qualified when you're working in international schools.
Yeah.
Whether you're teaching infant care or whether you're teaching secondary school.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a topic to discuss, because as you said, I guess it's you had 80% needed to work in New Zealand. Is that what? And that's right. And it's only like the kinder age kids in Australia at the moment, but that's definitely a good discussion. And then with ratios, is all the ratios, I guess, are they the same everywhere you go, or do you find it different?
No, country sets their own ratios, but they are quite similar. And Australia has quite good ratios for children as well, especially for children under 2.
Nursery is 1 to 4, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. But I think, to give that quality of care, because, over time things have changed. Like 20 years ago, children weren't in early childhood education for the hours they are now. Generally one parent was at home, or they would be working, school hours. But, our youngest learners are in school sometimes from 6:30 till 6. Yeah. And, our primary school and our secondary school students, they're not in school for that long. No. And they're not getting school holidays either. And they're going in, like, if maternity leave is 6 months, families are under pressure now. They both have to work. It's long gone that you could survive. You really, if you want children, which shouldn't be a luxury, which now pretty much is a luxury, that, both parents are having to work. And unless they've got family to help care for their children, then they are in early childhood care and education, for long parts of their day. And I think, that is something that has changed in the last 15 years. And, we do need to address it globally, how we are meeting the needs of these children and meeting the needs of our families as well, because I don't see it going back the other way.
No, for sure. Because I feel not many jobs will offer you the flexibility. Drop your kids off at a school time and pick them up at 3:30. Whereas you might have to start work to get into work. If you're going into work, you might have to leave home at 7:30. Maybe not get home to 5:36. So unless you have someone that can drop your kids off and pick them up, they're going to be in childcare or whatever it is for 11, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
Which is especially for babies, toddlers, kinder, like it's quite a long day for them. So yeah, definitely something to speak about. And did you get any people that you think might be good for the podcast?
I do have a few people, so I'll reach out to them and I'll pass them to you. On the spot.
Don't put them on blast.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely have a few. I have one person in mind I think will be really interesting. She's from Spain originally and been in Brisbane teaching as a kindergarten teacher now for, I think, 8, 9, 10 years. And she has a wealth of knowledge, actually. She has a master's degree in special needs and, lots of experience in working. So I'll definitely pass you on to her and you can have a chat because she's been teaching in Australia these times. And yeah, definitely she's have a wealth of knowledge to share with you about all sorts of topics, controversial and not as well. But thanks so much, Shane, and thank you for the work that you and your team do for the early years as well. It's really important, the gross motor skills and bringing children confidence and taking control of their bodies and learning about the different ways that they, can take ownership of their body and learn to coordinate themselves. It goes a long way, and it's a really important skill for children to master in the early years.
No, thank you. No, thanks so much for coming on. It's I think it's been a great chat, and a really different one to what we've had. Obviously, talking about the overseas stuff, and I think it's going to bring. I feel like there would be a lot of educators that would have a passion to teach overseas, but just don't know where to start. So I think this could help a lot of people. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on. We'll obviously touch base and we'll say hi as we move on. But thanks again and have a good day. Thanks,
Shane. Nice to see you. Bye. Take care. Bye.
Episode 5 of the Early Years Learning Lab with Amy Sparks in the books. I thought it was a really good chat. So if you do have any questions or if you're looking at trying to, maybe teach overseas or do that sort of thing, shoot us a message and we can pass you on. Amy might be even able to speak to you and kind of, set you up or get you in contact with people you need. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. Write a comment, let us know what we should talk about, and we'll see you in the next video.